I think that Bitcoin is the answer to a lot of challenges that are going to come with traditional finance in the dollarization of our economy. Bitcoin is a protection from the ultimate erosion we're going to have to see. Something that is unsustainable has a tendency to stop. I think it was economist Herb Stein who once said that. Our spending is unsustainable.
Jeb Hensarling opens with a striking message. Bitcoin is revolutionary and necessary because of the dangers facing traditional finance. He recalls the recent period of high inflation in the United States, warning how excessive government spending, regardless of whether it was politically justified, had eroded purchasing power and exposed vulnerabilities in fiat systems. Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space, and drop your comments and observations in the comment section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
I just think this is revolutionary. I'm so excited about it, mainly because of the fears that I have. One of the great, themes that was important to me when I served in Congress was the democratization of credit and investments. So, number one, we lived through and we saw what happened with the highest inflation we had seen in a generation most recently, tied to prolific spending, whether it was required at the moment or not. We saw the results. As a student of history, we've seen it in other societies. Now, I don't believe the U.S. is ever going to be the Weimar Republic of Germany. I don't think we're ever going to be Argentina, much less Zimbabwe. And thinking that this question might arise, I don't know if this can be seen on the camera.
We can see it.
This is a $10 trillion note from 2008 printed by the Central Bank of Zimbabwe. And what you might see here in the lower left-hand corner, a friend gave it to me. It cost $8.95. Okay? So this is what can happen in inflation. Now, again, I don't see this happening to this degree in the U.S., but I am fearful that we will see the erosion of nest eggs and of purchasing power, okay? Bitcoin is a protection from the ultimate erosion we're going to have to see. Something that is unsustainable has a tendency to stop. I think it was economist Herb Stein who once said that. Our spending is unsustainable. One day it will stop, and central banks, again, are going to monetize this debt. Bitcoin prevents these nest eggs from being eroded. So that would be point number one. Point number two is, at such a time as we see this type of devaluation, these type of interruptions in our economy, Bitcoin is going to be just allowing an explosion, I believe, of economic efficiency within our system. And another aspect of Bitcoin that I'm very excited about is, this cross-border transfer of wealth. I'm speaking to you from Dallas, Texas. I'm a fifth-generation Texan. I've spent a lot of time south of the border in Mexico, particularly in my youth. I was in Mexico the day, it probably happened many times in their history, where they nationalized the banks. I literally saw armed Army personnel in banks preventing the populace from accessing their wealth. Okay, that's not going to happen with Bitcoin. As a libertarian, a conservative, I never forget whose money it is. Bitcoin allows it to be really your money. It strengthens your private property rights in your wealth. It protects it from the state, and it protects it from erosion, from bad state policies, and it enables greater economic growth, not to mention greater privacy. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important that the U.S. be the leader in blockchain and cryptocurrency. And I think we both share. We think the Bitcoin is the winner when it comes to cryptocurrency, but it's important for us to be the leader to ensure also that privacy is respected as well. So for all those reasons, I think that Bitcoin is the answer to a lot of challenges that are going to come with traditional finance in the dollarization of our economy.
This, to Hensarling, is the core promise of Bitcoin. You truly own your money. It strengthens property rights, ensures sovereignty over assets, and creates a form of wealth resistant to political seizure or inflation. He frames this as a libertarian ideal, rooted in the belief that governments should not control the financial destiny of their citizens.
Relatively speaking to the U.S. population and the size of the U.S. economy, Bitcoin is still relatively small. Now it's growing by leaps and bounds. I think that this stablecoin legislation, number one, helps mainstream Bitcoin even more. And so you've lived through, and you were a visionary here, Anthony, but you've lived through the cycle of kind of, what is this thing? This is such a speculative asset. This is, what was it, 16th century tulips in Holland that everybody gambled on and lost their shirts, to where now people are starting to say, okay, what is this? Number one, stable coin, the Genius Act, to some extent, put the imprimatur of the federal government saying, okay, this is an acceptable financial instrument. We have looked at it. And to the extent you believe we are in charge of consumer protection, we're allowing this to move forward. Okay, depending upon your risk adversity, all of a sudden, you're starting to say, okay, this is a less risky asset than I thought. So I think that's a very important point. And once you have government, to some extent, putting their imprimatur on stable coins as an acceptable financial instrument, they get more accepted, as you well know, by mainstream Wall Street firms. Soon to be Y'all Street, but that's a different subject. And once that happens, the people already have pre-existing relationships with JP Morgan and BlackRock and Blackstone. You start to mainstream the idea, and as it becomes mainstream, it grows even further. Then, as a matter, I would say, of U.S. policy, we are seeing, other nations try to de-dollarize their economy. I don't view myself as either a globalist or an isolationist, but I do believe it is important today that the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. It allows us to do things that we otherwise would not be able to do, okay? To establish a stable coin that is tied to the dollar helps keep the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And as people get comfortable with stable coins and are even more comfortable, and as the Bitcoin movement kind of grows, that's going to allow to build other digital financial assets. And I can't think of any financial instrument that ultimately can't be digitized. And so again, this is, the most important step of a long journey is the first step. So this is the first step, and I just think it's going to be an incredible journey, and it all really starts with the Genius Act, stablecoins, and Bitcoin. I'm leery of the federal government. I'm skeptical of the federal government. I used to be in the middle of it, and I saw it firsthand. And so I think a healthy skepticism should be encouraged, number one. Certainly to have, for example, a central bank digital currency. From an efficiency standpoint, it would be great. It would be fabulous. But the privacy concerns are real. They are very, very real. And so wherever, again, you see government ownership, wherever you see government subsidy, there ought to be some concern of what policies are going to flow from that. So, number one, as an aside, when President Trump announced, we're going to have this Bitcoin reserve and kind of a sovereign wealth fund, and I thought to myself, well, don't you have to have wealth before you have sovereign wealth? Last I looked, we're about $30 trillion in debt. We'll put that aside for the moment. I would say to some extent, when we're looking at the national balance sheet, it is fundamentally different from personal balance sheets. Particularly, and I'm another project I'm involved in is kind of the democratization, for example, of retirement security plans like 401ks. And I believe people ought to be able to have Bitcoin in their 401ks. Again, whose money is it? And I'm not a financial planner. I'm not offering this advice. But in my own case, I want stocks, I want bonds, and I want Bitcoin. And as time goes by and the debt gets worse, I'm pretty sure I'm going to want even more Bitcoin in my personal portfolio. But I have a very healthy skepticism of the U.S. Treasury and the central banks getting involved. I think potentially this could be a bad precedent, and to some extent, with the passage again of the stablecoin legislation, hopefully the passage of the Clarity Act, there's other ways that crypto writ large can be legitimized. And I think, listen, bottom line is sovereign governments are never going to give up their opportunity to control the money supply. But what's important is not that they're going to give up their ability to control currency, but that we have alternative currencies and alternative private currencies, which at other times in our nation's history we've had. And what we'll end up seeing is some form of what Gresham's law, which the economists listening to the podcast know, and that is ultimately bad money drives good money out of circulation, which means there are going to be even more private Bitcoin available because as the dollar continues to degrade, it's going to drive out Bitcoin even more.
He sees stablecoin legislation, Bitcoin adoption, and even public skepticism of federal finance as symptoms of a larger shift, a long journey toward a parallel financial system, one that may eventually rival or even replace the existing one.